The term source, I learned that from a guy that I think is super bright, and he was using it in the educational field. And the idea was teaching parents about how they think about raising children and education, what is important to them that then they try to teach to their kids. And he would have seminars with these parents about once a month to teach them how to be parents, really. I think the fun thing is when you become a new parent, I'm not one, but what I've heard is when you become a new parent, you really have no idea what you're doing, right? And everybody's done it for thousands of years, and you kind of learn from scratch or learn from your upbringing and try to replicate some of the things that were successful in your upbringing, maybe not do some of the things that you found not beneficial while you were growing up. And when we got into, or I got into this financial business, I realized that people also treat their financial lives very similarly. They have experiences, whether it's from a super young age or relatively recently, that then builds how they react to their finances going forward. Sometimes it's great because they are learning from the mistakes that they saw others around them make. And sometimes it's a reaction that doesn't have so positive consequences or effects. I kind of relate it to the idea that, you know, your parents could tell you, don't touch the hot stove. And some people listen to that and they learn from that and they don't touch the hot stove, even though they've never really experienced why this is something that they shouldn't do. And then others will want to see someone else touch the hot stove, see what occurs when that action is taken, and then they'll learn from that other person's experience and not touch the stove themselves. And then there's still a third group of people that won't take either one of those experiences as something that they should follow, and they have to touch the hot stove. They really have to feel the pain or whatever it is. With finances, there's so many different emotional reactions that people have to things that are either happening to them is what they feel like, or they've had an action that they've taken that has an impact on them. Some people just have to experience that themselves. So in the financial world, it expresses itself in a lot of ways. There's a lot of people that come to us that are doing something because it's a reaction to something that they've seen. And it goes in all sorts of different directions. Some people like to spend every single penny they make because growing up, they didn't have much. And they saw their parents maybe be too frugal. There's examples I've seen specifically where they feel like their parents were too frugal growing up, and then something happened health-wise, and the parent was no longer there in their 30s and 40s, maybe 50s or 60s, but they worked really hard, saved every penny they had, and never enjoyed life. A lot of times those guys will just end up spending absolutely everything. Doesn't lead to a very good long-term plan, maybe a really enjoyable short-term life. And then there's the opposite effect, which is they saw their parents spend and spend and spend and spend, and maybe their parents in retirement had a really tough life, really tough way to make ends meet, and maybe had health issues that they couldn't pay for that had an impact on the kids even. And I'm saying kids, but let's think about these as 60, 70-year-old people. And so they end up being super frugal themselves just because they don't want to end up in that same sort of situation. So there's not a right or wrong answer, but what probably is best is that people sit back, think about why they're treating their finances the way they do. Think through all of those experiences and how it's impacted little decisions that they may be making today. And whatever they decide to do with that information, we find that it's always better that that decision is intentional, having thought it through, as opposed to it being this emotional reaction that lives in our subconscious some way. So that's our idea of source in the financial world, is where does that source of all of your actions and emotions come from in relation to financial decisions that we're making.